One day, it will be you. Your heart will stop, and for a few dozen seconds after that, before everything goes dark, something happens inside your skull that almost no one can tell you about. Because almost everyone who has been there didn't come back. And the few who did come back bring stories so alike that science has finally started to take them seriously. You've asked yourself this before, in the middle of the night, for that 1 second when the plane hit turbulence. What happens in your brain in the exact moment you die? Over the last decade or so, scientists stopped guessing about this. They wired electrodes to brains at the exact moment those brains were shutting down, and recorded what happened inside. What they saw fits neither what religion believes, nor what the camp that says the lights simply go out believes. It's stranger than both. Let's start with what we believed throughout history. That death is a switch. The heart stops, the line on the monitor goes flat, and the brain shuts off instantly, like a bulb when you flip it. Black. The end. For decades, medicine assumed that the moment the heart stops, the brain falls silent at once because it's cut off from oxygen and blood. It seemed obvious. And then someone finally measured it, and the machines showed something completely different. In 2013, Jimmo Borjigin of the University of Michigan hooked rats up to an EEG and induced cardiac arrest. The expectation was that brain activity would drop to zero. The opposite happened. Within the first 30 seconds after the heart stopped, the brain erupted. It fired off a wave of gamma, the fastest oscillations the brain can produce, the very ones tied to intense awareness, focus, and the processing of memories. And these were not fading scraps. The signal was more organized and more coherent than in the same rat while awake. The dying brain, for a few seconds, looked more conscious than a living one. You might be thinking now, fine, but that's a rat. How do we know your brain would do the same? In 2022, doctors hooked an 87-year-old epilepsy patient up to an EEG to monitor his seizures. During the recording, the man unexpectedly had a heart attack and died with the equipment still running. For the first time in history, someone had recorded a human brain at the exact moment of death, and the recording showed the same thing as Borjigin's rats. In the 30 seconds around the heart stopping, a surge of gamma waves appeared. And what's more, in those specific bands that in a living brain handle recalling memories and dreaming. A year later, Borjigin completed the picture. She connected 4 dying, unconscious patients to an EEG as their ventilators were switched off. In 2 of them, in the minutes after the oxygen was cut, the brain flared again with that same gamma wave in regions tied to consciousness. But the strongest signal came from a study of people who survived. In 2023, the team of Sam Parnia at New York University studied 567 patients whose hearts had stopped in hospital. Roughly 1 in 5 of those who survived later described a clear, conscious experience from the time when, from the outside, they looked completely unconscious. A sense of separation from the body, watching their own resuscitation without pain and without fear, and a calm, orderly review of their entire life. People don't just see their actions, they live them again and weigh them, as if watching themselves from the outside. And in some of them, the EEG showed something even more unsettling. The brain returned to near normal activity with waves typical of thinking and memory, even 30 or 40 minutes into resuscitation, at the point when, by every textbook, it should have been empty long ago. Put it together. A rat in a lab, an accidentally recorded patient, the dying on a ward, and hundreds of hearts that stopped. Every time the same pattern. The dying brain doesn't quietly slide into darkness. It flares up. And here, everything suddenly starts to fit. Because think about the things that, for centuries, in every culture and religion, people coming back from the edge of death describe. It's always the same 3. First, your whole life flashing before your eyes. That fits the gamma surge in the memory regions, in which the brain literally rewinds its own archive, perhaps in one last, desperate attempt to find in the past anything that might help it survive this moment. Second, the tunnel and the light at the end of it. That fits the oxygen-starved retina of the eye, which shuts the image down from the outside in, leaving for a moment a bright point in the center of your field of vision. Third, an overwhelming, unearthly peace. That fits the flood of chemicals the dying brain releases as its systems begin to fall apart. There's even an unproven hypothesis that the brain dumps its own dose of DMT, the same molecule behind the most intense psychedelic experiences a human can have. It's still speculation, not fact, but it fits the scale of what people describe. Every element of the famous death experience has its counterpart in the hard neurology of the dying brain. You don't need the afterlife to explain it. Where does this flare even come from? The simplest hypothesis is cold and mechanical. Your neurons hold a charge all your life, constantly burning oxygen to keep order. The moment oxygen vanishes, that order collapses. The cells lose control and, in a single instant, dump everything they have left. This isn't a brain that decides something. It's a brain where every alarm goes off at once as the building loses power. Maybe this whole grand finale is simply the physics of a system going out. So do we know everything now? No. And here is the trap through which this question may never get an answer. Gamma waves are the fingerprint of consciousness, but a fingerprint is not yet the finger. The fact that the brain produces a signal that usually accompanies experience doesn't prove that anyone inside is actually experiencing anything. Remember, too, that only a minority of people revived after cardiac arrest recall any of it at all. So that final flare might be your last, most intense experience. Your whole life lived once more in a few seconds. Or it might be a completely empty discharge of a dying machine, a firework launched into a sky no one is watching anymore. And this isn't a temporary gap in knowledge that will someday be filled. Even if you had a perfect recording of every single neuron in those last seconds, there is one thing you still couldn't read from it, whether it was happening to anyone. Experience from the inside is invisible from the outside. We can see the firework, we will never see whether anyone was watching it. And this is the one thing no instrument on Earth will ever read. I can show you every wave, every number, every second of that recording. But nobody can tell you whether, in that last second, you will still be in there. And now something that breaks your whole question apart. You asked, what happens in the moment of death? But what if no such moment exists at all? Your brain doesn't die the instant your heart stops. It keeps running on the last of its oxygen and energy for long minutes. In 2019, scientists at Yale did something that had seemed impossible. They took the brain of a pig 4 hours after its death and, through a system pumping a specially designed fluid, restored circulation and some of its cellular functions. I'll be honest, this wasn't consciousness. The brain didn't come back to life, no organized activity appeared in it. But cells that by the textbooks should have been dead minutes after death could still be saved 4 hours later. Different parts of the body and brain go out at different rates, so your death isn't one event, but many small extinguishings spread out over time. That means the death of the brain isn't a line, it's a slope, a slow fading step by step. You don't go out like a blown out candle. You dim, layer by layer, system by system. And the moment of death you asked about is a boundary we drew for convenience, for the death certificate and for the doctor with a watch. In your own skull, that single point may not exist at all. And there's one more, darkest consequence in this. Since there's no single boundary, from the inside you'll never register your own death. The last thing your brain does cannot contain the knowledge that it has just stopped. You won't hear the click. At some point, there simply won't be anyone left to notice that the recording cut off. So what really happens when you die? For maybe a full minute after your heart gives up, your brain may burn brighter than it ever burned in life, firing off one last program that no scientist can yet read. Maybe rewinding your entire life, or maybe just humming into the dark, and no one knows how long it lasts from the inside, because lived time is not the same as clock time. Those few dozen seconds the doctor sees on the monitor may, for you, stretch into something with no end. Your last moment and all of eternity may turn out to be the same thing, and you will be completely alone in that room. No machine, no doctor, no one who loves you will follow you in there and read what it was. Whether it's the richest experience of your life or utter emptiness, you'll find out in the only place from which no message can be sent back. Death isn't a door slamming shut. It's the longest, brightest fading that awaits you, and it belongs to you alone.